Let's get started with race number 4 from the Secureum Bootcamp. So in this race we have an in-Secureum contract, which is an implementation of a ERC20 contract. All of the questions are about the same contract snippet, which is this one, and in-Secureum is adapted from a widely used ERC20 contract. So based on the includes here, it is probably some adjustment of OpenZeppelin's ERC20 implementation. We can see that it extends the context library, which provides this, this message sender function here, which is basically just a wrapper around the normal message sender, which is intended to provide kind of an API in case that a request has been forwarded in case that a transaction has been relayed and then forwarded to our contract, and then we would have to use this context message sender because it would be different than the actual message sender, which would be the forwarder. Kind of complicated, not really important. Anyway, we don't use the message sender directly here. Instead, we use the message sender function from the context library. And we also implement the IERC20. So this, because there's an I in front, that means it is an interface. So we implement the standard ERC20 interface, which contains all of the function definitions that are required for an ERC20. And it also implements ERC20 metadata, which implements which is an interface for implementing metadata functions that aren't required for ERC20, but they are possible to have. And those are functions for name, symbol, and decimals. So basically these three functions. So let's jump right into question 1, which says that in Secureum, so the contract implements an atypical decimals value. If we look at the decimals function here, it returns 8. And as you might know, the typical decimals value returned by an ERC20 token is typically 18, not 8. And it is typically 18 because that is the number of decimals that Ether has. So just to make things easier and to not have different decimals, most tokens choose to also make use of 18. And that is why it is correct that this contract uses an atypical decimals value. Then we have B, which says that it implements non-standard decrease allowance and increase allowance functions. And if we see here, yes, indeed, it implements two functions, increase allowance and decrease allowance. And these are indeed not standard. These are not part of the ERC20 standard, but they are more like a helper function, or more like helper functions, because we have already in a previous race discussed the possibility of front-running attacks in regards to approvals. And these decrease allowance and increase allowance function, they basically prevent such front-running attacks from happening. So indeed, it implements non-standard decrease allowance and increase allowance functions. Then we have C, which says it implements a non-standard transfer function. You can see right here, that's the transfer function. And non-standard meaning that this is this function, this is actually the internal function of the underscore. Where's the normal transfer function? There it is. The normal transfer function just calls the internal one, and this transfer function is indeed part of ERC20. It is part of the ERC20 standard, and therefore this is not a correct option because it doesn't implement a non-standard transfer function. It implements a standard transfer function. It cannot be D. Therefore, for question 1, A and B are correct. So that was pretty quick. Let's take a look at question 2 as well. In the in-Secureum contract, the decimals function can have pure state mutability instead of view. So we had already looked at the decimals function before. Here it is. It is currently public view virtual override. And the important part is that it is a view, and view means that it is allowed to access contract state, or rather it is allowed to access the state of the chain. So in this case, it isn't accessing anything, it is just returning a hard-coded value of 8. So it definitely doesn't need to access any chain state at all, and therefore this can indeed be made pure, and therefore option A is correct, can have pure instead of view. B says that underscore burn can have an external visibility instead of internal, and C says that underscore mint should have internal visibility instead of external. So if we look at burn and mint, there we have them. Mint is external and burn is internal, and according to these options, these should be turned around. But that doesn't make sense, because an external mint function allows anyone to just mint arbitrary amounts, and we definitely do not want that. There should at least be some sort of authentication going on here to make sure that only authenticated users are able to mint tokens, and in that case it would be fine. Generally, when functions are prepended with an underscore, that usually means that those functions should be internal. They are internal functions that are not supposed to be called from external. So the intention here is actually that a mint function without the underscore calls the underscore mint function, but before calling the underscore mint function, it does some sort of authentication and make sure that the person is actually allowed to do that. Same is true for the burn action, so this should not be changed to external, it should remain internal, and if something should be burned, then maybe there should be a public burn function that allows burning, but only maybe the message sender is only allowed to burn their own tokens, but not arbitrary tokens of arbitrary accounts, because this happens from time to time, a public burn function, and usually when that happens what happens is that this is exploited to burn all of the tokens in some exchange. So in some automated market maker, all of the tokens in that automated market maker are burned, and then the automated market maker is suddenly completely unbalanced, and that is basically a very effective market manipulation, and therefore these tokens that we just burned become super valuable, because at least to the AMM, these tokens suddenly become super valuable because there's so few tokens of them, so few tokens are within the AMM. So it is also just as dangerous as a public mint function is a public burn function, and therefore burn should not have external, definitely not, and mint should definitely have internal visibility of instead of external. Yes, so that is questions 1 and 2 of race number 4.